story? Raise your hand. Yes, in the back. Can I hear it? Can I get an amen? How many of you have not yet had the experience of hearing a bro-ho cautionary tale? Okay, this is good. So those of you who are already fans, you're going to be thrilled because there's probably be a story too you haven't heard. And the ones you've heard before, they only get better. Because over the years, they get less burdened by pesky facts. Okay? Peppers with exaggerated enjoyment. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, children and adults, prepare yourself. Hold your guts together. Don't slap your knees too hard. Please give a round of applause, a raucous, non-tame, reverent Mormon type of applause. But give a raucous round of applause like you're somewhere in a stadium, because we're recording this and not everybody knows how many people are here. They need to get stadium level excitement. So please, with no further ado, even though I keep giving a little bit more ado, as I say no further ado, with no further ado, past this ado, please welcome Bro-Ho's Cautionary Tales Comedy Hour. Woo!
Well, thank you. That's a tough act to follow. No, thanks everybody for coming out. I do have some stories because I don't use my head as much. I do things without thinking. I'm getting better at my age, and I've picked up a lot of stories from it along the way, and not a lot of things work out for me. Some of it's my own fault, but I'll let you be the judge as I share with you. But really to let you know why some of these stories happened and how they happened. Growing up, it's a little different. So everybody grew up a little poor. We grew up very poor. So poor, we were po, as they would say, because we couldn't afford the last two letters. But just to let you know, I don't want you to feel sorry for me, but I just want to let you know why some of the circumstances were the way they were. So my dad, he left when I was 4. And so my mom, who's sitting here in the front row.
We're sorry.
She had to go back to work full-time, school full-time, and did an amazing job with the little she had. But what that meant was there was 5 kids at home raising each other. So my oldest sister, who was 12 at the time, who's the same age as Emaya right now, and then my brother Nathan, who would have been Zaya's age, Daisha, who would have been my sister Jen's age, Kenya, who would have been my sister Becky's age, and then I don't exist in our family because we don't have 4, but I was 4 years old. So the supervision was a 12 and 10-year-old. And being the youngest of 5, I know a lot of people say, oh, the youngest always gets spoiled. Not in the Holmes family. We got beat. Not only did we get beat, we got hurt pretty bad. And you had to be tough. Our childhood was more like the TV show Survivor. And it was like Children of the Corn episodes. So just to let you know of why we had to, protect ourselves. So my oldest sister, unfortunately, didn't come in. She has a thing against churches, but she was the one who kind of gave our whole family a reputation. It started when she was getting picked on from a girl at school. She waited on the bus till the girl got off the bus. Now, we had a rule in our family, never start the fight, but always finish it. And we took that serious, especially with our siblings. So Delana, she didn't start the fight, but as soon as that girl pushed her, that was the last thing she did until they had to do surgery to remove her braces from her gums and lips. So then, when the Holmes were in town, we would get people looking at us, kind of nudging each other, just let us know we're there. And when we looked at them, they became astronomers. and would quickly look away. But that's kind of how our childhood was. My brother Nathan, when he got in a fight with Delana, he chucked a knife at her head. It stuck in the cupboard, like Steven Seagal style, and shook right there. And she dodged that knife Chuck Norris style, which is why she's here today and not in a room chewing on crayons and licking the wall. So we're grateful that we were bad aims, but we definitely had to take stuff seriously. So my sister, who's just older than me, she pulled a knife on me. I can't remember what the fight was about, but she pulled a knife. And I'm like, well, I'm a Holmes. I got to take this serious. So as I backed up to defend myself, the only thing I could find was cleaning ammonia. And when she saw that I was now weaponized, she's like, well, I can throw this. And I'm like, well, she is right. So those old bottles, they have spray and stream. Ammonia goes a lot further in stream. So I started spraying her in the eyes. And as she started screaming and dropped the knife and went to her knees, I knew I was in the clear to run for my life as my older sister came to check out the situation. I do feel a little guilty because she was the first one in our family with glasses and like the only one for quite a while, but it might not all be me. It might have been something else. But our cousins, they lived next door to us. It's never a good situation. When you have cousins that live next door, we didn't have any adult supervision most of the time, and my aunt and uncle could care less about them. And so they kind of ran wild as well. And my older cousins, they would have me and my cousin that he's 3 days older than me, they would teach us how to fight. And then they would put us on the tramp and make us fight. So we got really good at fighting. It was kind of like a little fight club in the back, but we got really good at it. And then we turned into hitmen for some reason. And so my older sister, who's 18 months older than me, the one who has glasses, so there's a kid bullying her at school because of her glasses, calling her Four Eyes. So my older siblings were on this shed across the street, and they're yelling to me and my cousin. They said, hey, Kelly, Kevin, that's that Hardy kid that's teasing Becky. Go knock him out. Well, if he's teasing my sister because she has glasses and I'm kind of the reason she's wearing them, I felt obligated. So me and my cousin went down there. I'm in first grade. This kid's in third grade. So I was giving up a lot of height to him. So I just sucker punched him and ran. He ran too, but his mouth was full of blood. Later on, we found out it knocked his tooth out. I was pretty proud of that. But childhood was a little rough. Some of the accidents that happened were provoked by older siblings. Some of them were just, I should have been thinking better. Some of them, I was just bored, and ADD is not great. So we had cats, lots of cats. We're not from Tennessee. We're from central Utah. But we had a lot of cats, and I was playing hide and go seek with these cats. And the funny thing is, everywhere I hid the cats, I found them. I hid them in the barbecuer, and it was one of those old kettle barbecuers, and it had the vent on the top, and their nose would stick up as they're trying to get air because it's hot out, and I'm poking their nose back down. It's like whack-a-mole. And then I figured I could just shut that, and their whiskers were in there, and they'd just slowly pull out. And then it turned into a game of, closing their whiskers in there. But then my mom, she came out to let me know that I had forgotten to do some chores. So I took off, ran, did those chores, ADD kicked in, and then a few days later, I'm out on the back patio, and something just smelled awful back there. And I look over and I see the barbecuer, and my heart just sank. And so as I open it up and I see these two cats had just roasted in there from the summer, I feel a little guilty about that as well. I forgot about the story until I was on my mission. And we're talking about cats. I don't know why. There's an investigator. I'm not a fan of cats. I had 3 sisters, they had cats, and I was just so done with cats. And this investigator, she had this huge cat sit on my lap. And I'm looking at it, and she's this older lady. She's like, Elder Holmes, do you like cats? I'm like, oh, I love cats. They taste like chicken. And so she quickly had her cat get off my lap. But that's what spawned it. And I remember the story of when I accidentally killed 2 cats, and I did the math. I was 7. So I've been baptized. That has been washed away. So thank goodness for that. But some of the other stuff. So the funny thing with if there's a funny thing about killing the cats, my brother, without knowing, bailed me out because I had to dispose of the bodies. And I never had to do that in my other hitman stuff. So I grabbed the grill and I took it over, and the side of our house was a bunch of tall weeds, and I just tossed their bodies into the weeds and went and set the grill down. Didn't tell anybody. Probably should have mentioned to wash that. I'm not sure if we cooked on that like a week later. It cooks out though, right? So my brother, he came across the cats. And so he yells to get everybody's attention. And he's like, hey, I found our cats. And he has everybody come gather around, and I'm just like getting ready to confess. And then he just said the best thing in the world. He said, it looks like somebody tried to drown them. You're right, it does. And I just quickly backed away and left it out of mind. I never mentioned it again until I remembered it on my mission. And so I don't know if you ever remember those cats, but minus a couple. No, but that same brother, you always look up to your brother. I looked up to him except when he was beating on me. And he was strong. He was 6 years older than me, so we never got in fights because I don't want to get beat up all the time. But he got this BB gun. And he was shooting his target forever. And I just wanted to shoot it once. So I just sat there, and it's freezing cold out. It's in the winter. And I had this big puffy coat and no gloves, and my hands are just freezing. And I'm just like, if I wait long enough, he'll let me shoot his gun. And I kept begging him, and finally he's like, tell you what, you go pick up all my BBs behind that target, and I'll let you shoot the gun. All right. So I ran over there, and I'm digging through the wet grass, making my hands even colder, and I'm starting to get a little pile in my hand. I'm like, wow, I'm finding a lot of BBs back here. Little did I know, my brother's gun, it's the type, the more you pump it, the harder it shoots. And every BB I pick up, he's got about 5 pumps in there. And in his mind, he said, I wonder if this will go through his coat. And he just kept pumping and pumping. And as my little hands were shaking and freezing cold, full of BBs, I felt this sharp pain right in my back as I dived into the cold grass, throwing BBs everywhere, and just realized my own brother shot me right in the back. And when you're little and you cry so hard, you can like barely breathe. It was one of those. And I was 4, he was 10. I knew I was 4 because my dad was still around. And I remember I was trying to stop crying because I knew he would get a worse beating if I was still crying when my dad got home. And so they knew how to quiet me down. They're like, can I make you a sandwich? Like, what can we do? And they took me in, and I'm still like, couldn't get a hold of myself. Dad walks in. Then I just laid in my bed as I heard my brother get beat for that in the next room. But part of growing up, you got to be strong. That was definitely part of it. But when I talk about us growing up poor, so my mom worked at a gas station, Trailside, in the next town. So we lived in Orangeville. Has anybody ever heard of Orangeville, Utah? Yeah, okay, all right. So a lot of people compare their towns of like, hey, we only had one stoplight. We didn't have any of that. we had a couple stop signs, and that's about all I remember. Very small town. We had a gas station that had produce, so that was like a small kind of grocery store. We had to go to the next town for another grocery store, clearing the price for civilization. But we had this cereal that I think it's illegal to sell now. And my mom had this big vat that she'd pour the cereal in. And it's not like Rice Krispies, it's puffed rice. Yeah, right? Yeah, they serve it in prisons, yeah. And then there's puffed wheat. It's like Sugar Smacks or Honey Smacks, just without the honey. It's just the smacks. So we had puffed wheat, puffed rice, and then we'd get like one cereal that like had some flavor to it, and she'd pour that in there and mix it up. And it felt like a concentration camp. So we went in there with our bowls, we'd scoop it out of that vat and sit down, and that was our breakfast. But it was good. It taught us to survive, not only our siblings, but our food. Also, just, the ADD, just to make sure I stay on target. So, part of growing up, for one, I didn't think I was going to make it this far because I was so accident prone. I didn't know if I'd make it in my 40s. But I'm here, so ta-da. Yes, thank you. But whatever I'm here for, I need vision. For whatever reason, I've almost lost this eye twice. The first time was my sister. Not the one who I sprayed with ammonia in the eyes, but that would just be bad karma. So my other sister, she had this weed sickle. And if anybody's ever seen it, it looks like a horror film kind of a thing. It's like a golf club, but at the end is a sharp, jagged, like 4-inch blade on each side, and you just start swinging and going through, cutting down all the grass or all the weeds. Well, it was lunchtime. I was coming to let her know that it was time for lunch. And I mistimed the swing, which is very important when somebody has a weapon. And as I went to grab her to let her know, I just saw something black, and it hit right above my eye, below my eyebrow, and came out up here. So lost my entire eyebrow, a lot of blood. Holy cow, it bleeds from your forehead. Now, the next place that we could go was Price. That was the clinic/hospital. So we had to go in there, but they couldn't stitch it because I didn't have enough skin to stitch together unless I wanted to have my eye raise up the entire time. Luckily, my eyebrow grew back, plus the skin. But there's a fold of skin that didn't make it down when it healed. So I have this lump right here from that incident. I noticed it in some pictures when the light's just right. But fast forward years later, this is like 6 years ago. Now, some of it's my stupidity, like walking up with somebody swinging that weed sickle. Some of it is just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I've been told if somebody was going to throw a rock, it would hit me because it's me. And this is not any more true than when we went down to St. George. We were on vacation. 5 minutes into jumping into the pool, the kids are in there. Amy was changing Kenya before she could get into her swim diaper. So I jump in and I turn around, and all of a sudden another dark object comes and blasts me right in the face. And I had so much pain, I just lost all control of my body. And I started punching into the water thinking it's going to help alleviate this pain. And what had happened is some kid with this weighted diving dart decides to chuck it across the pool. And my kids were right here. So luckily it hit this, which stopped it from hurting them. And so I was bleeding from my eye. And that kind of freaks you out. So I ran over to the mirror and I look, and my eye looks like hamburger. I feel like there's gravel in it, but it's just my eye where it's all cut up and a little bit of it coming out under the white area. So I had to go to the Instacare. They put all these drops in my eye so it was glowing so they could see where the punctures were. There's 3 punctures. 2 of them were a millimeter away from my iris, and he said, if you get hit there, your eye's done. So you're very lucky. I've heard that phrase a lot, that I'm very lucky. So not only do I have my eyesight, Sister Tidwell and I were even talking because she was saying I was kind of like a cat because I have a bunch of lives. And one of those times that I almost lost a life, I was told I was very lucky, was between our house and our neighbor's house. There's this telephone pole. Well, this telephone pole had this huge breaker box on it, and it was always locked. Until one day, it wasn't. And so me and my cousins, we went and we opened up the box, and there's all these switches. We didn't know what they did. But there's all these wires, thick wires at the bottom. And in the back of those wires is huge black widow. It'd been sitting there for a long time, eating bugs with nobody to harm it. So it was huge. But we couldn't get anything back there far enough to kill it. So I knew my brother just got this new buck knife from my grandpa. Now, as an adult, I understand electricity goes through metal. Not so much back then. So I went and grabbed this knife, opened it up, and I'm just aiming it. And I went to stab the spider, and the next thing I knew, I was 8 feet back from where I was, up against a wall, with sparks flying everywhere, and I was just shaking, and I dropped down, and I'm still shaking, and my cousins were laughing their heads off. And I hurt so bad. But they were laughing so hard it made me laugh. And so I'm starting to laugh, and I just get up, and I'm just like, I'm really thirsty. I have no moisture in my body. I zapped it all out. So I go inside, and I remember my mom just like, what'd you do? Apparently, some people's power got shut off at the same time that I got electrocuted. Weird coincidence, but I don't know if they ever found the kid that did it. But they told me I was lucky. Now, the wires I hit, that buck knife, the voltage was high enough, it blew a chunk out of the metal, which my brother was very upset about. Didn't care that I was alive, but I was upset about his knife. I never replaced it. I did say sorry. That should have been enough. But it was one that they said I was very, very lucky on that time. A couple other times, I've almost drowned. A couple times. One was at Lake Powell. My mom loves to tell the story. She loves to tell the story until I said this one little comment, which I'll tell. So we were at Lake Powell, and anytime I do anything, she's like, I ran over burning hot sand through sticker bushes in my bare feet like 100 yards to save you, because I wandered off into the water, and I just stayed there under the water with my hands up until she came, and she says, as soon as she pulled me out, I just gasped for air. So almost drowned, and she likes to bring that up. She ran all that way. And finally, I just looked at her, I'm like, why was I that far? How was nobody watching me? But
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
But also, at a hotel that we lived at for a little bit, and I'll tell you why we lived there in a second, I almost drowned in the hot tub. I'm really good at holding my breath. I'm just not good at standing up when I need air after. So I almost drowned then. My sister Jen saved me at that point. So I was very lucky.
I'm dying to know. Only because I'm like, okay, this is California. How did the police never come to your house? And be like, dude, like what happened to the
So-
lunchbox? Did they charge your mom? Like,
I don't know if we had police in Orangeville. I don't think it's, we kind of policed each other. Like the Wild Wild West still exists in rural Utah. You know, Yeah, there's old ladies that will beat you, and that's the police. So if they get a hold of you, yeah. But so part of the reason why we lived in a hotel, because we weren't poor enough, our house burned down. So that added to the fun.
Down.
It was inhabitable. So we decided to go to church that day and make scones. They think that might have been a cause. They don't know. But we went to church, and in Kelly Holmes fashion, I took off. And I went back home. And as I'm walking home, I'm getting hungry. I can smell somebody barbecuing. I'm like, smells like somebody's barbecuing something. Maybe it's a Humphreys. And I get back to our back door, and I grab the knob, and it is burning hot. Which I'm like, oh, the sun. So I go downstairs, because we have this daylight basement on the corner of the house, and I walk in there. And as I start going up the stairs, I hear something, and I look up, and the entire top half of the house is covered in smoke. And I could barely see the microwave light glowing. And as I'm staring at it, I didn't realize the wall right in front of me is starting to fall down. So I run out. And by doing so, ended up saving my mom's life, which we didn't know till the fire department said something, because they said when the house is like that, it's called smoldering, where it's to exploding point because it's so hot. And what I did when I opened the back door, the basement door, I let oxygen in. So the oxygen started to cool it down, started the fire up more, but everything in the kitchen was a loss. So I ran back to church, and my mom was coming back, probably to find me, and I just let her know the house is full of smoke. So her and a neighbor went in, they opened the back door, the doorknob was too hot for me, but they opened it up, sprayed it down, fire department came. Pretty much everything was a loss in the house. It was so infiltrated with smoke. We didn't have any clothes. We had the clothes that were on us. We didn't have much to begin with, and even that was gone. And so we started living in a hotel, and we were there for a bit. We'd go to the hotel in Castledale, and then my mom would take us up to Price because they had a pool. And so we'd do that like every other weekend or so when we saved up enough to go. But then going to school, it was a bar. There's only one place in town that served breakfast. And they had a bar in there. My mom says it was a cafe. It was full of smoke and truck drivers. And it was called K Bar K. So I'm pretty sure it was a bar, but it served breakfast. So we ate there. My mom dropped us off smelling like red Marlboros, to school. And that was second grade. And once we got into a duplex, it was next door to our house where our cousins used to live, just to one on the other side of it. I shared a room with my other sisters, and we literally had just a couple outfits was all. We slept in sleeping bags, and we had 2 rocking chairs somebody donated, and a 13-inch black and white TV, and that was it. Surviving, right? So when I say we were poor, it wasn't enough to be poor, but also to have that happen as well. But in our house, we had this shed that my mom always says, there's a mother's curse. You're going to get one just like you. I hope not. I love my kids, but compared to what I did, they're a bit of novices. We had this shed that had a few things in there. Me and my cousins, we broke in, and those outside light bulbs, Christmas light bulbs, the bigger ones, when you stomp on them, they explode. That is loads of fun. So me and my cousin, we stomped out every strand of lights we had. And we were like on the last strand as we're jumping midair, got caught, saw an adult, realized gig's up, we were busted. We got whipped for that. That was a bad one. The other time is we had these big food storage drums full of rice and wheat. And if you break the seal with a pocket knife, you can dig in your hands in those. It's so fun. And me and my cousins did that. And then later, there's like some of the wheat was brown and it smelled funny. And there's mice in there. I guess that was not black wheat. It was mice turds. So we wasted like 5 big things of wheat and rice. My dad took the belt to us for that. And then the final thing, because this shed was locked, but me and my cousin found a way to pull the back panel and we could slip in there like little rodents. Well, we found this box. It had a bunch of like documents and it had like old checks. The checks were all stamped, so we knew they were no good. So we thought we'd do my mom and dad a favor and just burn it. Sure. And so we did. And we lit part of the shed on fire. And turns out that was our IRS information that they're supposed to keep for 7 years. So if your dog eats your homework, I guess your kids can burn your IRS stuff. And that's what we did. But that shed, there's a lot of good memories in there, but a lot of them got us in trouble. Yeah, and next to that shed, if anybody knows me, they know I don't like sweets, but I do like cookies. I can eat myself to a coma with cookies, and I've tried, and I did once. My mom made a plate of cookies, and it was right at bedtime, and I just remember looking at that mound of cookies. Oh, there could have been a rainbow going to there, and that was that pot of gold on the other side. And she said, no cookies. Those aren't for tonight. Well, she went to my sister's room, and the coast was clear. So I couldn't just grab 1 or 2 because they're still hot. So I grabbed the plate, and I'm really good at hide and seek, but it's hard to hide with hot cookies. So I ran outside, and as I go outside, I'm looking around. Well, my cousins, once again, bad case to have your cousins grow up right next to you. They had this old doghouse. I hadn't had a dog in years, and that doghouse had a flat, perfect hiding place. So I went in there, set those steaming cookies down. By this time, they chilled just right, and I ate every single one of those cookies. And I had to because I fell asleep on the plate. And I remember waking up to my name being called. And I open up the dog door and I'm looking out. And there's like a bunch of people walking up and down the street. My family just yelling my name with flashlights. I'm like, this is weird. So I went back to bed. And then I woke up to a hand grabbing my face and my chest. And it was my brother. And he's filling in there. And he's like, Kelly? Oh, you're dead. And then he yells out, I found him. So luckily, they were just relieved that I was alive because we had a canal by us, a river, and a forest. Like, I could have died so many ways, but I didn't. And so they weren't as mad about the cookies, just that I was okay. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of sweets still, but I do like some cookies. But sorry, I'm just trying to remember some of these. So other times, when I was lucky, our house had a hallway with a staircase at the very end going down. And I had this A-team van, like Mr. T. Now, I could get going very fast on the hallway, but as soon as you hit that linoleum, that's when you got to put the brakes on, because 4 more feet are wood stairs down to a cement ground and a cement wall. And I was 2, 3? 18 months. 18 months. I was still fast at 18 months. I was so fast my brakes couldn't keep up one time, and I came to a screeching halt just to tip and go pump, 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 pump down onto the cement, injuring myself greatly, but I was lucky. Once again, I don't know if that was considered maybe one of the lives. Now, they say that our ancestors are like our guardian angels, and I totally believe that, because any other guardian angel would have just quit and just like, you know what, lost cause, stamp this one, paperwork done, we'll just let him bring himself home. So my ancestors, they worked overtime to get me here today. But also, I hit my head a lot. And we tried to count the concussions I've had. I actually see dots in my eyes. If anybody ever knew this, I'm not on drugs, but sometimes it looks like bugs are in my face. And so I'll look and see them, and I'm like, oh, never mind, those are bugs. Or those aren't bugs, they're the dots in my eyes. And we tried to add them up, and there's like 6, 7 pretty severe concussions. One was a 3rd-degree concussion, right before you slip into a coma concussion. I'll tell that in a bit, but I don't know if this one was a concussion, but it was quite impressive, because I was up on my top bunk, and my sisters were trying to come in my room. My friends were in there, and maybe I was just watching too much WWF. And you're like, hey, you can jump off things and protect yourself. So when my sister came in, I jumped off the top bunk, and I cracked my head on the doorknob, and I bent the doorknob. I hit it so hard. So, you know, harder than steel or brass. Another time, though, hitting my head, we were playing kickball at school, and it was a foul ball, but I wasn't going to give up on the play because I'm going all out until there's ice, and then I'm just sliding. And I go sliding, and they have this downstairs, but there's this steel railing, and I go full speed sliding into that railing, hit my head, and I had this goose egg that I could see with my own eyes. So they called my mom. Our phone number back then was 748-5353. Still remember it because the principal had to call it a few times. And I got ice cream from it, maybe a mild concussion. I don't know, went cross-eyed for a little bit. Not anymore. But one of the other concussions, my brother, this time he wasn't beating on me for like being mean, just bad timing. So this one wasn't even my stupidity, or was it? We were at the dump, and we were unloading this truck of all this stuff. Now, I'm too small to pick things up, so I'm just like pushing it out. And as I'm pushing it out, my brother sees this big lead pipe, and he's quite the baseball player. And he's like, I wonder how far I could throw this. So he gets it up like a baseball bat and goes to chuck it right when I stood up. So I stand up, he clips me in the back of the head. I go flying limp into hot garbage. And when you wake up, my senses were very keen as far as my smell. My vision was blurry. Everything sounded muffled. And it was my mom and my brother standing over me thinking that my brother just killed me because I was out cold for a bit. And when everything came to, anytime I go to the dump still, that smell of hot garbage brings me right back to when my brother just laced me right in the back of the head. Actually, you can see this lump on the back of my head here. That wasn't from him, but I think he cracked my skull enough to harden it that it saved me when I rolled a four-wheeler when I was 15. So I was at this farm. I worked on a farm, which it was fun, but it was also where I almost lost this eye a third time because we were setting this fence and hammering in the pikes into the gate. A piece of metal shot into my eye, and so I had to pull it out. which really hurts, pulling like cold metal out of your eye as you feel it just slide out. And every once in a while, if you ever see me and this eye is a little bit bloodshot, it's because it's been punctured a few times. And that diving dart, not only did it puncture it 3 times, but it damaged my tear duct so it doesn't water like it used to. So if you ever see me like that, it's all right. I'm dealing with it. It's fine. I go through eye drops like crazy. But also on the farm, this lady, she bought us these 4-wheelers to clean things up. And afterwards, she let us go take these 4-wheelers out. Well, my buddy's 4-wheeler was acting up, so he jumped on the back of mine. We just go blazing down this dirt road, and one of the dogs ran out in front of us. And so I swerved to miss it, and we just start sliding. And on those dirt roads have these lips at the end to keep all the rainwater out. Well, that tire caught that little dip on the side, threw my friend off, threw me into a pile of rocks. And as my head hit in there, I could hear the sound of the 4-wheeler spinning behind me, and that rack on the back hit me right here, which is why this is a little more pronounced on the back of my head. And that's what gave me the 3rd-degree concussion right before he slipped into a coma. Also tore my ear where they had to stitch it together. There's still a piece of cartilage missing. It looked funny. I looked like a wrestler with cauliflower ear for like a year or 2. And I came home, blood all over me. My mom, who was on the ambulance, mainly because she had a son that really needed some EMT trained person at home at all times. She just looked at me and they're like, he keeps repeating everything. She's like, Kelly, what day is it? I'm like, summer? And that's when they took me in to the hospital. And I don't remember that day or the next 3 days, but bits and pieces as I would start remembering things, or I was trying to make nachos and I had 9 plates out because I forgot what I was doing. And then I thought, oh, nachos sound good. And I went and grabbed another thing of nachos. But that was good. Another time that I hit my head pretty good, and this one was kind of stupidity, but after high school, me and a bunch of friends were like, do you know what would be cool? If we all rent an apartment together. So there's 9 of us, and there's a 3-bedroom apartment. And the guy that was renting it is from Vegas. He didn't care. He's like, if you get your rent on time, I don't care. So we were living in there, and we had we didn't need a laundry room. So we were decorating it. And me and one of my friends worked at the movie theater, and he had this huge Austin Powers poster. And I'm like, how cool would that be to have Dr. Evil in his time machine on our wall? And it's that huge cardboard prop. So couldn't fit in my car. Couldn't fit in his car. But his mom and dad had one of those vans that was like the custom van. It had the 2 doors that open, the ladder on the back. We're like, hey, we could open those 2 doors and stuff it in. So he borrowed his mom's van. We drove it to the movie theater. We opened it up. Still wasn't big enough. So I'm like, hey, there's a ladder on the back. Why don't we just set it on the roof? I'll stand on the ladder and I'll hold it down. He thought it was a great idea, so did I, and we didn't think anything past that. And so we drove out of the parking lot on this frontage road, and if you're ever in Cedar City, and you're on that south end of town, there's that, what do you call it? The lighthouse, thank you. There's that lighthouse. There's a movie theater right there in this long frontage road. That was the frontage road this happened on. So he gets up to about 25 miles an hour, and when wind hits a big flat object like that, it's hard to hold. So it went flying over my head, and so I hit the top of the van. He pulled over. He's like, yeah, it's probably not a good idea. I'm like, no. I know what the problem is. The wind's getting it. I just need to push down the front. Problem solved. So I climb up onto the ladder a step higher, and I'm standing up there pushing it down. He gets up to about 40 miles an hour, and this is working great until it's not. And so it starts shaking, And as it's shaking, I knew exactly what was going to happen. So I put my other hand on it to push it down. And at this moment is when I realized I have nothing holding onto this van. And as it took flight, I began to parasail off his van. And as I go flying, I'm looking at the ground thinking like a cartoon, just run, and when you hit the ground, it'll be cool. And so as I thought that, it turned sideways and dumped me. And I hit for a split second on my feet, then my shoulder and head, and then my feet, and then my head, and then my feet, and then side, 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 side. And I'm watching this car behind us with its tires smoking as it's hitting the brakes, trying not to run me over as it watches my teenage body fly off this van. And when I get up, my friend was laughing too hard to help me. I had 3 rocks in my hand here. I had one deep into my elbow. You can probably even see the dent still. You can definitely feel it. If you want to feel this, definitely. It's crazy. So I popped that out. So I had him drop me at my mom's house because she's an EMT. She had all the stuff. So I went there, scrubbed, pulled everything out, pulled the rocks out, found some super glue. Tell you what, once I got introduced to super glue, that saved a lot of hospital trips. So I'm pretty much a pro at it now. But bandaged myself up, and this same friend, McQuaid, he's in another story, but he definitely helped me out. We were talking about this when we were down at his house last. It was hilarious, because he said he just saw me in his rear view, just flying away. Very painful experience, but he was also in the back seat when the flyer said, don't do this at home, don't do it anywhere, but we had these firecrackers, which are great fun. We would throw them out the window, not at people, but close enough to scare them, and this was fun in Cedar City. Well, one time, my friend Curtis was driving, I was sitting passenger, and McQuaid was in the back, and we're like, hey, let's go scare our friends. 'Cause they're over at a girl's house in our ward, so we drove over by there. We threw out a whole pack, lit it on fire, chucked it out the window, and we just pop, 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 and they took off running, and he took off, just squealed the tires, went around the corner, and we're like, hey, let's go check it out again. So we go around the block, and we come back around again, and they had already run to the back. And as we're looking, we noticed their next door neighbor, whose house points the other way, their garage was opening. And the garage was flashing red, blue, red, blue. And we forgot the sheriff lives right next door, and this is 2:30 in the morning and really hard to explain. So we took off. And we had these really long, wide roads, and so we're going like 80 miles an hour up these roads to get away from the sheriff, who does know my mom, because she's on the ambulance and worked with his wife, knows him very well.
They were in the ward.
They were in the ward. So we were in this high-speed chase with the sheriff. My friend got away, and we were like so excited. And we went downstairs, and we're celebrating quietly because his parents are up sleeping. And as we're down there, we heard footsteps. And we're like, what is going on? So we just pretend like we're asleep, and his dad comes in, no shirt on, so something's up. And he said, Kurt, boys, there's some deputies that want to talk to you. So we're like, what? Oh, that's weird. Okay. Don't know what they want to talk about. So we go up, and as we start going up, McQuaid, he's like, I'm on probation. I can't go up there. We're like, all right, we'll take the blame. You just stay down here. So me and Kurt go up there, and these deputies, they're in their 20s, and you could tell that they kind of thought it was funny, but they couldn't give that away, even though they kind of did. And they're like, we could get you for resisting arrest, for like tripling the speed limit, reckless endangerment, and just rattle off all these things. And we're like, we could put you guys away, impound the car, and nobody would be the wiser. We're like, oh my gosh. So when we realized how serious it was, then they're like, when Jim, who was the sheriff, realizes you guys, he was too upset to come talk to you. He will come and talk to you. He did come and talk to us. The next Sunday, we walk out of the chapel, and he pulled us into a room and let us have it. But he didn't tell my mom, and that's why I'm here today. But these deputies are like, you probably wondered how we found you. We're like, actually, yeah, we ditched you pretty good. And he said, well, he knew it was a red sports car, and he lost you on one of these 3 streets. And we went to every red sports car, and yours was the only one that had a hot engine at 3 a.m. And like, these guys are brilliant. They deserve to catch us. Now, funny story, because McQuaid, who was on probation, who was also the driver when I went parasailing, is now the chief of police in Mesquite, Nevada. So he probably goes a little lenient on the kids, which is good because, he's been there. He's done that. But, yeah.
Kelly. Yeah, and the bishop never told me either, and it was his house that you were at.
Yes, but he was not the bishop at the time. And he valued my life as well. But, yeah, stuff like that nowadays they kind of frown on. Just a little. But some of the other times hurting myself, once on the mission, no, not in this crowd. Well, twice, speaking of super glue, we were playing football, and I was a safety, and I wasn't watching the receiver, and as we were running full speed, we clicked heads, and it gave him a goose egg, and it busted my eye wide open. From here up was just kind of, well, they said it was probably a 6-7 stitch kind of a cut, but I had a bandana on, so I pulled it lower so I could hold it till we could finish the game. And we won, side note. But afterwards, I was so good with super glue. I knew I was good with super glue. But it's really hard to see what you're gluing in the back of a little shop in Chicago with a dirty mirror. I could barely see my reflection, but I glued it, and it felt fine until I tried to close my eye and realized I glued it like crooked. And I didn't want to look like this forever, so this was P-Day. We're downtown having fun. I'm like, I'll worry about this when we get home. It's dry, nothing I can do now. So we get home, and I'm in the back, and I have to fix this. Now, if it didn't hurt bad enough, trying to rip out the super glue from that wound, is a lot of it got in my eyebrow. And I gotta hand it to you girls, plucking hurts, especially 30 or 40 hairs at a time. So I had to pull this out to redo my eyebrow. And once I do rip that out, now I'm thinking a little more sense. So I shave my eyebrow a little bit more on each side, re-super glue it, and it's pretty good. From that same football game, another missionary went to the hospital from a concussion, and he got told on to the mission president's wife, so he told on me, and she called me up, and I told her, everything's fine. She said, well, how many stitches? I said, a bottle of super glue, which she was not thrilled about. And so when she saw it, she said, I want before and after pictures, which I think I have them somewhere. I'll have to get those out. Pretty impressive from what it looked like to how it is now. And my mission president, he felt for my guardian angels because he got called a few times from that, from wrecking my bike, from getting doored, from lighting my hands on fire, which was a good idea until it wasn't. Because when we were growing up, we would put lighter fluid on our hands and light them on fire, and then we'd just shake it off. Well, we didn't have lighter fluid, and we didn't have the money to buy lighter fluid, so we did have a lot of hand sanitizer. And for years, in the bishop's office, I don't know if it's the same bottle, but it said, not for Brother Holmes, because of this story. So I thought, hey, we should reenact that in lighting our hands on fire and caption it, baptism by fire. So I get a bunch of super glue on my hands, and I get a candle ready. Get a bunch of hand sanitizer in my hands, get the candle ready, and I start putting it on there, and I light my hands on fire, and I put them up. But the problem was, there was no bright yellow fire like lighter fluid does. I mean, it's pretty distinguished. And I'm looking, and it's blue fire, but it wasn't visible. So I just hold them up in pain, and my companion takes one blurry picture of his hand, and this is back before digital cameras, and I couldn't wait around for the second picture, so I ran into the bathroom, turned on the tub, put my hands in there, and it's not going out. That sanitizer is hard to put out. Also, it absorbs. So think of that when it's on fire. So I'm absorbing fire into my hands, and I'm rubbing it, trying to put it out, finally get it put out, and I had zero hair all the way to about halfway down my arm. And I'm like, we need to go to a dinner appointment. This is going to be interesting. So the Newman family from Germany didn't speak a lot of English, which is probably why they didn't understand why my hands were red and puffy and I could barely squeeze them. They were so swollen, I could barely bend my fingers. And so trying to eat steak and potatoes was very difficult. They thought I was on a diet, and I wasn't known for that. But I did get blisters on here, which super glue works good on lacerations, not on busted blisters. But I still tried to super glue it anyway, and a week later, after an interview with the mission president, he shakes my hand, and as he feels my hand crumple, he doesn't let go, and he looks at my hand and realizes there's super glue over there, and he knows me and my super glue, so he just looks at me and says, "What happened?" I didn't really want to tell him, but I had to. So I told him I lit my hands on fire, and he threw his pen and said a few things. But he would always just, Elder Holmes, don't die. Don't do something that's going to hurt you or kill you. Well, that almost happened on Michigan Avenue. My trainer did not like his companion, so he'd always take me to service, which is a lot funner downtown in the city. So just to tell you, this guy's 6'8", 290. He was on the crew team for Penn State. He actually forewent the Sydney Olympics to go on his mission. He placed second and first throughout most of his high school career in the Junior Olympics and in the World Championships. He was good. And so he would coach rowing downtown to these kids downtown. Well, we were late, and we're going down, and the fastest way to get anywhere in Chicago is a bike. And so we're going down Michigan, or Lakeshore Drive. There's this place called Lincoln Park. It's like a 15-mile park all along Chicago, and there's this running trail. And he's up there just huffing and puffing. Well, I learned a little secret. He doesn't look back, and so if I get close enough, I could grab his seat, and I'd slowly stop pedaling. And then he would huff and puff for both of us. And I just had to steer and hold on. And I've done this a couple times, and this time, I definitely needed to. My legs were dead. So I grab onto his bike, and I'm holding there for a little bit, and then he kind of shakes a little bit, and I look up, and then he looks and sees me and what I'm doing, gets a little frustrated, and he goes, boom, and kicks my front tire, which is very hard to steer when somebody does that. So I go swerving out, and I swerve back in to correct myself. Well, his bike had that quick release. It also acts as a hook, and it hooked my front spokes. So as it hooks my front spokes, my front tire goes to an immediate stop, and I don't. And so I go flying through the air, and as I'm flying, all I can do is grab onto his sling bag and drag my feet. And so as my bike is flying into the grass area where a bunch of people are picnicking, trying to dodge my bike, I'm holding on to the back of his bag, dragging my shoes, which definitely needed polished after this. And so he finally came to a stop, and I was able to get off his back and go over to my bike and I was missing like 25% of my spokes. I had like 4 spokes gone and the next 3 like bent in. But it at least drove. And I rode around like that for a couple weeks until I got doored, and that really did in the front tire because we were hustling to get back to the apartment. Somebody opened their door right in front of me, and all of a sudden I hit their door, and I'm stood up, my bike back tire is right by my head, and this guy's still trying to get out of his car, and I bent his door all the way back. And I thought it was pretty impressive that he couldn't shut his door. It bent it so far back he couldn't shut it. It bent in the front fender. But when I went to try and ride my bike, I couldn't ride it. The front tire was bent so bad, I had to redo the front, or unlock the front brake just for the tire to wobble back to our apartment until I could get a new bike tire. But a lot of crazy things. Some of them my fault. Some of them just bad timing or in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes even trying to do nice things can get you in pain. We were with some friends down at Lake Mead. There's a Shakespeare family, the Holmes family, and the Baldwin family. We went vacationing a lot. Well,
Kelly Shakespeare?
Val and Susie.
Kelly would have been older than you, but it's your family.
Oh, yeah. So they're a family of all girls. There was...
Not an older brother.
But it worked out good because he didn't have a son, we didn't have a dad, so he would take us to fathers and sons a lot. My brother dated his oldest daughter. I never dated any of his younger daughters, but one, she was really fun. And I thought she was kind of cute. And we're down at Lake Mead, and I'm roasting these marshmallows. Really good. I don't put them in the fire and burn them all the time. I can hold them out and just slowly roast them so the inside is like liquid lava deliciousness. So I cooked one like this, and she asked for one. I'm like, I'm going to make this one perfect. So I'm cooking it, and it is perfect. It is just liquid, hot marshmallow in the inside. And I'm going to go deliver this. And she's on the other side of the fire. So I go walking around this sand. I didn't see that somebody was messing around and flipped a hot coal out. So as I step on that hot coal, I lost it. I lost a marshmallow too, because I just chucked it at her. And now she gets hit with a marshmallow right in the chest. And she's pulling it off like she just got tarred and feathered. And it's not coming off. She finally gets it off. The next day, I had a blister on my foot. She had a blister on her chest. We were both wounded. Trying to do something nice, but sometimes you gotta watch where you're stepping. But maybe follow up with one more story, maybe 2. When I was in Indonesia, after my mission, we were going from West Java to Bali Island. And the guy I went down with, a lot of his family has never been to Bali. It's a very poor country. They couldn't afford it. So he chartered this bus to get everybody over to Bali. Well, we get on this bus, and we're in the city of Bandung, about 6 million people, and it's just jungle and volcanoes all around it. And we're on this windy road. It was not straight for 30 feet or kilometers, or however they measure. It was very windy, and I was getting motion sickness. So I went to sit in the front of the bus to help out. Well, the bus pulls off just to give us a break. And in these turnouts, there's people that are trying to make money, so they're cooking food. And you go and you sample the food, and the one you like, you're like, yeah, I'll take that. And so I did. And I tasted something. I'm like, ooh, that is really good. And they looked at me strange. I'm like, yeah, no, just load it up. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, all the way. So they kept loading up, looking at me weird. And I'm like, I don't know why. Maybe just they don't think I eat a lot, but I do. And we get back on the bus, and I start eating this stuff. It is delicious. And the guy I'm with, he walks past, and he's like, oh, is that Jankel? I think that's what he called it. And he took a piece and he ate it. He's like, ooh, yeah, don't eat too much of that. And as I look at him, because I ate about 3 pounds of that, he's like, yeah, even the locals can't even eat half of one of those. It just messes with your system too much. And I'm calculating in my mind, I probably had like the equivalent of 10, and immediately my stomach felt like a water park. And I hear water rushing. And I'm like, this ain't good. And I'm thinking, what can I do? What can I do? Because we just barely left, and we're not going to stop for another number of hours. But I was in luck. Our bus had a bathroom on the back. And I looked, make sure nobody's back there. And as I stood up, the alarm went off. And I just went as straight leg as I could. And I'm holding back a reservoir, and I'm shaking. And then it starts to pass. So I took 2 steps, and nope, had to stop. Waved to everybody, everything's fine. Take a couple more steps, and I had to do that all the way back. And anytime you have that feeling, you know it's not going to be good. But I'm like, another step, and I'm in that bathroom, and I walk in the bathroom, I shut the door, and I look down. It's an Indonesian toilet, meaning there is no toilet. It's just a bowl in the ground. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to bend my legs right now as they're shaking. Now, the Indonesian toilet is also their shower. So they don't believe in toilet paper. They have a ladle. And the ladle starts to flush. The ladle's how they clean themselves. The ladle's how they shower. You take off your clothes, ladle yourself, wash up, ladle yourself off, put your clothes on soaking wet. They don't believe in towels either. So that's already not very comfortable. So as I'm sitting in here waiting for the right moment that I can relieve this water park that is going on and is now a wave pool down lower. So, and again, this road, very windy. So I'm in there bracing myself as we're going back and forth. And so immediately I go down. And I made it. And I'm so relieved. And all of a sudden, we hit something. The bus ran over a curb or a car or something, but I'm not bracing myself against the walls. I'm now bracing myself against the ceiling. And in the back, you know how those shocks are a little bit more absorbent? I go flying. And I'm not the only thing flying in there. And so I just hit the ground, and I looked down, might have said something, and then I just start ladling off. And I realized this is not in the bowl anymore. It's just slushing around in here. So I'm trying to gather everything because it's going under the door. And so I'm trying to get everything together, trying to do what I could to save what little situation there was. Finally get everything in there, get it flushed down, get myself washed up. And I felt more miserable than I ever had in my entire life. But when I opened that door, it was like a shockwave of stink going through the bus, row by row, as people turned and looked at me like, what is that? And they don't have windows to roll down. They have a little vent that everybody started cracking and putting their face up. And immediately the bus turned a bunch of people just staring out, just trying to suck any clean oxygen they had. We did stop before a few hours. They stopped fairly quick after that. They just had to air out the bus a little. And let me tell you, if you ever want a weight loss plan, that messed me up for a while. It was like years later. We were first married, and so I can't explain it. It's like the texture of a water chestnut, maybe a little softer, but they said it's related to the potato. Well, if I ate its cousin, the potato, it had this distinct smell, and after the mission, I worked at R.C. Willey. I started in the warehouse. I cleared the warehouse. That's how bad and potent this stuff is. And I couldn't get above a certain weight for a few years after this stuff. It will do your system in. Even the locals avoid it. They just need to learn, tell the white guy, because our system is even a little more bougie than most. So it was pretty bad. But I survived that. One other thing, one last story to wrap things up. It was another time that I was told I was lucky. Since Amy is married to me, she also got told she was lucky as well. Not that she was married to me, but just that we got through this. But we were at Fish Lake, and we were coming back home. We were going to camp, and for whatever reason, my arm was in such pain, and I could not get to sleep. I'm like, let's pack things up and head back into town. I can't do it. So we pack everything up, put everything in the car, and as we hit the road, I'm like, hey, do you want to say a prayer? So she says a prayer, and within 2 minutes, not even that, we start cresting this hill, and we hit the cattle guard. Everybody knows when you hit a cattle guard, you're in open range. So as soon as we hit that, I glanced down at my speed to see that we're going 55, speed limit. So as soon as I glance down, I hear Amy scream. I didn't even have a chance to look up before I just hit the brakes. So as I hit the brakes and I start to look up just to see this cow come through our windshield, and the sound of the glass imploding, just popping with glass dust all over us. And I keep holding on the brake. We come to a stop, and it's just this eerie silence other than our engine on fire. So I try and pry my door open, takes a little bit, and by the time I get out, I go around the car. Now the flames are about 6-7 feet in the air, and it's burning, and we are in the middle of nowhere. So I come over, Amy's panicking, and I'm prying her door open, and as I slowly get her door pried open, she is in shock. And she starts unloading things from the trunk, and I'm like, just let it burn, it'll be fine. And she did save my golf clubs, heaven help her. And I'm like, actually, maybe that tent and sleeping bag would come in handy, because I'm not seeing anybody on this road. So she starts pulling it out. My hand is bleeding like crazy, and the cow came through and crushed my hand, crushed glass into my knuckles. And that was all that had happened. So as Amy's doing that, I'm walking a mile down the road, a mile up the road, trying to call 911, trying to get any signal. I'm not able to. Now, this is a cool story for a couple reasons. So we're sitting there, we get back to the car. By this time, I'm like, we should probably get the insurance. So I run back there, and by this time, the car is melting by the windshield, and the windshield was slowly melting in, and it was really cool to watch. The paint was on fire, and it was like red and purple and like blue flames as the paint's burning. It's crazy. But as I'm grabbing the insurance information, I noticed the tire was on fire, and I'm like, hey, maybe we should back up. So I tell Amy, I'm like, hey, we should back up. And halfway through that sentence, the tire explodes. I'm standing right next to it, and as it explodes, our hubcap goes flying off into the field, and I'm like, maybe we should back up our stuff a little further from the car. So we back it up. The cow flipped over our car. We hit it so hard, it flipped over, dented our trunk with its hoof, and it was still alive for a few minutes, but every time it tried to get up, those legs on the one side were shattered, so it couldn't get up. This guy pulls up to us about hour later, and he rolls down his window. I knew it was from Central Utah how we talked. He just looks at the car, looks at us, said, well, that ain't good. And so, you are right. It is not. So he pulls us down into Loa, and I use a credit card to open a door and jump behind the desk. I won't tell you how I knew how to do that, but jump behind the desk, call the fire department, call the sheriff, and they go out there and meet us. The sheriff meets us first, and he has this full-size pickup, chains the cow up, pulls it off, and he looks at it, notices a brand. He's like, oh, this is so-and-so's cow. And he talks about it like he was a kid. I'm like, I am sorry I killed his cow, but it was right in the road. But he said, you guys are very lucky. Anytime it's a car, we get called out to bag the bodies. He's like, these cows are as heavy as some cars, but they're up a little bit, and they just come through and crush the people. And so I was telling him what had happened, and he said, what his theory is because we hit our brakes so low, that's the lowest point your car goes. And he thinks we just kind of scooped it up and over. Now, interesting thing, this fellow that picked us up to take us into town, as we're driving down, we got talking, and he said he was from Huntington, Utah. Now, if you remember to the back when I first said how my dad left when I was 4 years old, he came around a couple times here and there. But like the last 12 years of my life, he was zero part of, but I knew where he lived. And so anytime I met somebody from down there, like, oh, do you know Eldon Holmes? They're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm his son. They're like, oh, I didn't know he had a son your age. I'm like, oh, I'm from a different marriage. I didn't know he was married before. Yeah, he's got 5 other kids. I didn't know that. So it was always a fun game. But so this guy, he's, when we were going down, so he said he's from Huntington. I'm like, do you know Eldon Holmes? He's like, yeah, how do you know Eldon? I'm like, that's my dad. And as he's trying to look back in the back of his cab in dark, because this is like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, trying to see me, he's like, I didn't know yet. Like, wait, so are you like Kyle's older brother? Or I'm like, oh, I'm from a different marriage. And he has 2 daughters with him, and they're like, wait, so Kyle's your brother? I'm like, I guess, I don't know. So, maybe? Is he related to Eldon? No, so we made that connection. And then after he dropped us off, he went on his way. He had somewhere to be. He couldn't hang out with us all night, I guess. But the tow truck driver did, because I had to call my brother. He picked us up at 3:30 in the morning and drove us back into town. They're like, we got to get your hand looked at. They're like, we have a clinic in Bicknell. I'm like, I'll take my chances until we get to a hospital. I don't want to get stitched up the same way cattle do. So later, about 4 years later, I'm working at R.C. Willey. I used to sell furniture. If you ever have questions about mattresses, leather, I can help you out. But this guy goes back there, and it wasn't even my turn to pick somebody up. And so I'm just waiting, but nobody's picking him up. I'm like, I don't want him thinking we're like ignoring him. So I go over and start talking to this guy and ask him where he's from. He's like, oh, from Huntington. I'm like, hey, do you know Eldon Holmes? And he looks at me. He's like, did you wreck your car 4 years ago? Yeah. Are you the guy that picked me up? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I didn't even know what you looked like, because it was like in the middle of the night. And so he's like, I never got a chance to tell you what happened to us that night. I'm like, oh, shoot. Did my bad luck run out on you or affect you as well? So he said he was supposed to be in Fish Lake by 5 because his wife didn't want him driving on the road with open range at night. I didn't blame her. So he's like, I got home late. Things kept happening at work. Then my daughter, things kept happening for her. She wasn't getting ready. She didn't have anything done. He's like, we got on the road like 5-6 hours later than we ever wanted to. Now his wife and other kids were down at Fish Lake waiting for him, thinking he should be here by now. And they were wondering what happened to him. So his wife came over and he's like, hey, this is a guy that hit the cow. And she's like, okay, so this is a true story. Because when he came back to drop us off at the car, By that time, it looked like an Iraqi car bomb. There was nothing left. Everything had burnt. Like, we're looking in there like, this is our car, right? Like, we left it here burning, but so I guess this is it. Like, the seats were just the coils. Like, the car was melted to the ground. They had to rip it off of the fire truck. But anyway, so he was talking to her, and she's like, yeah, I thought he got in a bad accident, and I was just freaking out. So he told me it would happen, and I told him, I said, did you know we were on that road till 3:30 in the morning with the tow truck driver till my brother came to pick us up, just so we had somewhere to stay in his cab in the tow truck. And you were the only vehicle that entire night. So if you didn't have all that crap happen that day, you wouldn't have been there to drive us in town. And I'd be bleeding out on the side of the road as our car barbecued this cow that we had just tenderized. And so it was kind of that cool little moment putting that together. Because I remember when that happened, for a bit I was like, really? We just said a prayer. Those usually work. You usually say a prayer and then total your car, burn it to the ground. I only thought that for a split second, but I did realize, we were very lucky. Now, 6 months later, 2 people got killed hitting a cow. And they were going 45. So it was just one more like, hey, yeah, we saved you. Thank you again. But prayers are answered because I'm still here. But some things, I have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some things I thought was a good idea until it wasn't. You can be the judge. But that's me, folks. So, anyway.
Well done, buddy. That was great.
Thanks.
You're good, man. Wow, everybody give it up for Kelly Holmes one more time. And don't go away. Don't go away. I learned, this is very educational tonight. Hope you all learned something. I learned 5 things tonight. I learned 1, do not violate the laws of physics.
Or they will violate you.
Or they will violate you. Do not violate the laws of the land, right?
Yeah.
Also, do not violate the laws of God. I've learned 4, do not try this at home. Okay? And I've learned that God must love you, my brother, so I'm glad that you're still here. So,
Yeah,
all
thanks.
right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This was a great night. I sure appreciate you sharing all that. Somehow you kept it all there. That was really great.